Watercolor is a great tool for art journaling. It's pretty inexpensive. You can get it in many different forms. It's travel friendly and it's very manipulative. You can do a lot of different things with watercolor. So I'm going to the very, very, very basics of watercoloring. And what a lot of art journalists will do is they'll get their journal, which this one's mine, and they'll just plop color on a page like so. You need your journal, you need a brush, and you need your watercolor. Today I am using my Koi watercolor set. It's the Pocket Filled Sketch Box Koi watercolors from Sakura. It's the 24 color set, and they just go to town doing this. And you always get hypnotized by their color blends, and I mean, they know what they're doing, they know what they like. Sometimes it can get repetitive. Think like, I only have 24 colors. Yes, I can get over 500 colors with this, but this, like, I'm not learning anything from this. Yeah, I'm kind of seeing how colors mix, and oh, that just turned like muddy. Or I really like this color blend, I'll use it again. But then you're kind of just repetitiveness. You're doing the same thing over and over again. And you could be getting the same results, or you could be getting something different depending on your hand or your brush. So there's that. So that's what you would do. And I cover the whole page, and then I dry it, and then I write on it. But say you want to do more than just that. Say you want to actually use some watercolor techniques and learn how to actually watercolor maybe a scene or a texture that you really like that you saw in another watercolor piece. So the number one step is to know which watercolors you are planning on using and knowing them really well. So here I have like a pan set, which I know this set really well. It's very loved, very used. So I like them because they're travel friendly, and if it dries and my daughter touches it, I'm not like, oh my goodness, like that sort of thing. So I like this the best. There are also tube watercolors, which can be pretty inexpensive, but you want to make sure you use them continuously because this will dry up. But if it does, you can still add water. So, but there's that one. So I use this from time to time. It's not my favorite, because I take too much paint and not enough water. So, and these are both student grade. And then there's liquid watercolors, which you buy in jars. And I don't have physical watercolors. There's Dr. P.H. Martin Hydrocolor watercolors. It's in a ring and has all the colors. There's several sets. I will eventually get my hands on them. The closest thing I have is Jane Davenport mermaid markers, which I consider to be almost the same thing, but in a travel friendly version. It is literally a water-based substance, liquid, that you can add water to thin it down, and it will, once it's dry, it will react to water again, like a liquid watercolor. So those are your three supplies. And once you pick one that you think you really like, then you have to know your brushes also. There's several brushes here. I am a major fan of round brushes, so I only picked two. This is a flat brush, and then these are, they call this a sword or a striper, or an angled flat. So however you want to take that. And then this is a dagger one for cursive, or liner, dagger or liner. People, different brands and different places around the world will call them different things. And then this is a round mop 12. These are from the same brand, Master Touch. So this one will hold a ton of water, a ton of water, and I don't even really use it for watercolor. I use it for dusting away product and eraser shavings and such. So, and each brush will do this a different thing. Before I go into that, I do want to talk about paper. You technically need a watercolor paper if you want to watercolor and really learn techniques and expand. In my art journal here, this is not watercolor paper, but it See how it like sits on top and doesn't really soak in? So that's not watercolor paper. I actually use this as a sketch paper that holds pastel, colored pencil, marker, ink really well, and it does water just fine. I don't do a ton of water, so, and I don't really do paint like acrylic in here or gesso a lot, so I like it for watercolor. Yeah, because this is handmade, it did bleed in places, but it doesn't bother me. This is the Canson watercolor paper, 9 by 12, 140 pounds, cold press. Cold pressed has a little bit of a more noticeable texture. Hot press is a lot smoother, so cold press is usually more affordable. So, and then this is actually from the kids section. It's watercolor paper, and I really like it because it's smooth like hot pressed for like $5. So I use this a lot. It's the same size as this, and I really like the finish that I get from this. So for this activity, yeah, you could probably put this in your art journal and write notes and stuff, but for this activity, I'm going to do it on paper so you can see it and you're not getting awkwardness from the book, if that makes sense. So I will show you the brushes now. Sorry, getting sidetracked. So you have to know your brushes, and if you don't know your brushes enough, you can make an art spread with just mark making and knowing your brushes, how large they're going to span, how they're going to make marks, and you can really color blend with them. So I'm just going to do a few here with each brush, and I'll try to use the same colors so that you kind of get the idea. And if you would like to do this along with me, that would be fun too. I just like rounds, and I'm not trying to make this like perfect or anything like that. Just enough where it does it justice. I am a left-handed writer, but I do almost everything else right-handed, so I don't have a preferred hand for painting yet. I mean, it depends. Like watercolor painting, I don't have a preferred hand yet. I just don't know which one I like the most. There's that one. So you get the idea. I will do this one. This one holds so much water. And these pans are very, very tiny. So the larger the brush, you're going to have problems cross-contaminating, which is why this thing looks so used and loved. I think I'm going to go in with like an end color here. It's really good for laying like a really light sheen of color. Now, if you use tubes, this is a better brush for tubes. So it's just massive. And then the flat brush. Oh, I lost my dagger somewhere. The flat one's really good for laying down a flat watercolor. For like a background, or say you're scared of a white space, just lay down a wash of like a really pretty red or a really pretty blue that you like. But you have to be aware of color mixing, which will be a whole other video. The dagger or the liner one is where you get into your hand lettering, which I struggle with tremendously. Bear with me here. This brush is, I was gifted a bunch of craft supplies, and this was one of the items. So I'm fortunate that I was gifted these beautiful things, and I try to use them. Like, I can't get enough paint on this to really, but you get my point. You can make really nice green vines with this kind of brush. So there's a leap for you. So play with your brushes as you purchase them or gain them, and you can just have fun creating based off of the mark making that the brush does. This is a striper or a sword. I thought it was a dagger, but I don't know. Each company or each place in the world will call it something different. This one was really fun to use because it can get you some really sharp, clean stops and goes. So for this activity though, I think I will use this one to give you an edge, or even this one. We'll see. I don't want it. Actually, we'll probably go with these two. A round and a flat are a good duo to start with. If you needed to buy brushes, I would buy one round and one flat. If you think you're going to use the flat, or you like the techniques that it gives you, I don't see myself using it very often, and I don't know why it's stained. So there's that one. And at one point in time, we'll do a video on like your work activities or your, I call these exercises. What the heck are you going to do with this? You just wasted a piece of paper. No, you didn't. So bear with me on that one. Get another piece of paper here. And I like this because it's cheap, but it's real watercolor paper, and it's okay if you don't like something when you first create on this, because you can always use more water to dilute the paint and paint again, or use acrylic on top. Alright, so one of the first techniques that you could learn is dry on dry. So you really need a dry brush for this. So I'm going to dry this brush off. It's pretty good. And you're using very little water. Your water is really important with watercolor because it's in the name of it. So very little water, very little paint. Very little water on brush, paint, and surface. And you're just going to dry brush. And it's going to give it a little bit of a texture. The less water, the more texture, or I call it striping, that you're going to get. So there's dry on dry, which will give you really good background texture. And I mean, if you really like one color, then it's wet on wet. So you would wet your surface first. Watercolor paper will take a lot of water, so don't be afraid to let it kind of pool on your paper. And then wet on wet. Which will give you that really soft, calming blend. The more you move it, it's not necessarily wet on wet anymore, but I did use a lot of water. That's wet on wet. Very calming. I have my notes here. Give me one moment. There it is. Oh, so this was wet in wet, wet to wet. Yes. And then you have a wet on dry, which is a very wet brush, which I hope you can see what I'm doing here with my brush. And the flat brush is working pretty well with this, so if you really want to learn, I would go with flat brush. And you kind of get like a mix between these two with a really wet brush on dry surface. You're still getting a little bit of that texture of the striping, and then you get the calm blend. So that was wet on dry. Wet on dry, yes. Okay. And this is also technically flat washes. It's just a flash wash of color. So I'll go ahead and label these flat wash. Now a graded wash is where you're taking a very large, hold on, you're taking a concentrated amount of color, a lot of paint, a good amount of water on your brush, and I just like to keep it really saturated. And then you're going to grade it to softer colors. So I like to take a little bit of water and add to it. I even squeeze my brush too. I think that's just force a habit. To the point where you basically don't have any more color and it's just all water. So this is really pretty too. Really easy. Fun to make. So that's a graded wash. And then you have the variegated wash, which means you're going to blend this into another color. So we'll do the blue again. Well, I guess we'll pick a purple. Well, maybe we'll do a green. Now, I do it this way. There's plenty of YouTube videos out there on this, but if you want to learn several different techniques into variegated washes, there's tons out there. And I'm using a lot of water here, and I just dipped my brush in, stroke, dipped my brush in, stroked, clean my brush, and go back into that blue. Kind of leave some in the water. And I like that a little bit better. Yeah. This can get tricky depending on your paint quality too. It can look gritty or not blended. These blend pretty well together. Now, my tube watercolors don't blend very well, so. And I see that the green's really pushing that blue, so I'm going to add more blue here. And it all depends on your water too. Your water is really important. But that's a variegated wash. You could literally do a book full of variegated washes and get beautiful results. So that's a variegate. Bear with me one moment. Yeah, okay. So then the next thing is you're doing a wet on wet technique. So you're going to wet your paper. And you're going to do maybe a flat brush of this beautiful orange. A flat wash, sorry. And you want to blend it with a really pretty, let's do this color. This is where I'm going to get a round brush here. So get some of this in here. This is what you call blooming or bleeding. You're going to bloom that color or make it bleed throughout the orange. And that can be really pretty too. So that's blooming or bleeding. I'm going to do that again here. And I'm going to do it in just plain water too. So I have my water here. I'm going to bloom that pink into here. You can really play with this. all day. It's quite therapeutic. Okay. Okay, so then that actually looks pretty. Okay, so I'm going to move this aside. I'm going to go to the next few techniques that I have here. Which is spraying color. And that kind of involves a little bit of extra supplies, but spraying color is literally taking a tube of watercolor, tube paint. You could use pan, but you'd have to really butcher pan. Wouldn't make sense. You take your tube and you put some paint in the tube and you add water so you can spray it on. This is not this brand. It's a student grade. I used maybe 2 squirts, like 4 uses of toothpaste in this bottle, and it's really pretty. But once it dries, it fades a lot. So I'd almost need, if you want it really vibrant, be prepared to use artist grade quality, professional grade quality, same thing, called different names, or a lot of a student grade paint. So keep that in mind. But spraying is just another way to add a color, texture background in a very simple form. So you absolutely love blue backgrounds. Use a spray in blue and then add whatever you want to it. Obviously, be aware if you add blue and orange, it's going to mix and be a muddy color. Keep that in mind. Glazing is also something really good to do. It involves layering colors in basically a grid form. It's really good for learning how to testing color mixing. Let me rephrase that. It's really good for knowing what colors go together and don't go together. I think it's really fun to do. It can be time consuming if you want to let something dry and not have it go crazy through. I mean, we will do this exercise with the colors and the mixing and stuff, but it's really fun. You'll get a lot of different effects and color blends. I'm using a bunch of cool tones, but with that yellow spray, I'm just going to get mud. But it's fun. It's different. And if you don't end up liking it, just blend it away with some water. Move your paper. If you don't like it. Now, I use reusable rags instead of paper towels I can just wash them. You save a little bit of money. If you don't like something, you can try to lift it, which is another technique, with just brush and water. You're really saturating the physical paper with water. You have to be careful with this though. You can rip your holes in your paper. You blot it away. Now that's a lot less yellow, but you get what I say. If you don't like something, you can get rid of most of it. There might be a little bit of um, staining effect that happens. I will do this grid again since I just blended that one away. It is called a glazing. We'll use some of the not so pretty colors here. We'll try to see if we can get something to dry. Okay, so I'm going to let that, give it a few seconds to dry here so it is less likely to bleed. When you are trying to, well, you just learned the technique, but if you're trying to paint something and you're impatient like me and it kind of blends together, it's considered a bleed. Like on this page right there, that's considered a bleed bloom. So unintentional, it's still a bleed or a bloom. Dripping is another way to add texture. So technically this is now considered a flat wash spray. It's one color just over top, so it's a flat wash spray. And say you want to do some drips, you want a lot of water so it drips off the brush. And if it doesn't necessarily drip, you can use a spray water and spray it to get it to drip, which is also considered a bloom or a bleed. But this is all on wet. This is very wet paper, so you will get a slightly different effect on a dry paper. So keep that in mind. That is actually pretty. I don't mind that. So if you think you don't like something when it's on wet, wait till your page dries and then try to add more to it. It might be pretty to you. You never know. Another thing you could do is splatters, which I just flick on the page. Your brush does make a big difference to which kind of a flick or a splash you're going to get. I like to use this massive brush and load it up manually. Let's go with this red. I usually use a pretty large brush that holds a lot of water, and I paint the top of the brush. It does take some time, but I like the effect it gets. So this is usually like a finishing touch for me, so it's very like, oh my gosh, I'm almost done, I have to do the splatters. So I call this like a flicking splatter, because you're flicking your brush, which this is a crappy brush, as you can see, because I'm losing hairs, but it's affordable. So, and I really like what it gives me. So all those little, because I'm using it as tiny little brushes, it's going to give me a smaller splatter. If you use this one, it gave me bigger ones, and the big round brush, the number 12, will give me even larger ones. So those are splatters. You can even use a straw, which I currently don't have here, and you can blow it to get it to splatter even more. That could be for a super messy Monday type thing. So, but those are techniques that you can use instead of just plopping and getting bored with your watercolors. Let me show you here again. So this is all splatters, and this is glazing. Let's see if this one's dry here to glaze on top of it. Yeah, so it was pretty dry, and you can see that this one's stronger in pigment than the lime green because it showed through. But you can get a lot of cool effects with that. You can erase with water or blend it, make it bleed with water. If you're crossing two colors and you didn't want to, it's considered a blend or a bleed. You can do a flat wash, which is just a flat wash of color, and build on top of that, which is, this one was wet on dry, this was wet on wet, and this was dry on dry. I love this texture and forget to use it a lot. The variegated wash is also really fun to use, which you can add blends, splashes, glazes on top to really blend out all those colors, bleeds, and your one color gradient wash. This is also a fun technique to really know how far one color can go. It's like a tube painting. You're tired of using 18 colors. You have way more colors than just 18 colors if you use this in full capacity and you keep blending down with water. So this is fun. So, and then also knowing your brushes will give you tons of lines and marks, different variations to something you didn't think you had. You're used to always having one brush and one set of paints, and you're like, man, this is boring. I'm getting tired of this. I want to find something new to use with my supplies, or I need something new to excite me. No, you need to step back and think, okay, what is something I don't know how to do with said brush or said paints? That's how I ended up turning these 24 colors into over 500 colors. I was tired of using it. It sat in my desk drawer for about a week. And it's like, you know what? I need to see how many colors I have, because I was dipping hard into 3 colors, and now I have tons of colors that I absolutely love. So that's how you learn. And I love mark making on top of white and test products. I think it really adds interest, and you're building on openness, if that makes sense. So this will be part 1 of part 6 of videos that I plan on making, so stay tuned for the rest of them. I do hope you enjoyed this and you learned something from it. And this is considered plopping watercolor down. You can do so many more things than that, other than the word plopping. It's laying color down. It's smashing the color down. I wrote everything down, and I can't see it now. So, but yes, this is literally all the same thing, several different names. If you want to use physical techniques, flat wash, wet on wet, wet on dry, that's where you're learning to build your knowledge of watercolor and using it on your art journal. But then you can ultimately build and learn how to create real items. I think abstract art is the gateway to everything. And once you have a handle and an okay thought process on making abstract art, you can create real landscapes, florals, people, pets, animals, war scenes, artwork, real artwork that you see in a gallery. Anyone can make it in baby steps. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you in my next one.